INFJs are one of the rarest personality types out there. People who know them often say they're deep, quiet, or complicated. But there's another word that shows up again and again: weird. To the outside world, INFJs do things that don't seem to make sense. They care deeply about others, but suddenly disappear. They listen with full attention, then vanish without a word. They notice tiny things no one else sees. They seem peaceful one moment and completely overwhelmed the next. And what makes it even harder to understand is that INFJs don't always explain what's going on. Most people try to fit in, but INFJs are different. They often live by their own internal compass. They don't follow the same social patterns as everyone else. Their mind is full of patterns, stories, and feelings that often make them act in ways others can't predict. This can make them feel like outsiders. Growing up, they may have been called too sensitive, too quiet, or too serious. Even as adults, people still see them as hard to read, or just plain odd. But the truth is, many of these weird behaviors come from how their brain works. The INFJ is ruled by something called introverted intuition. It's a function that processes the world in layers, through emotions, visions, connections, and unseen meaning. This creates a deep internal world that's hard to describe. They don't just react to life, they reflect on it, anticipate it, and feel it all at once. So yes, to most people, the INFJ seems different. But different doesn't mean wrong. It means rare. And in this video, we're going to explore 6 of the weirdest traits that set INFJs apart. Not just to name them, but to explain them. To make sense of the strange behaviors that are actually signs of depth, strength, and a completely unique way of moving through the world. Let's start with one of the most confusing traits: the way they flip between deep emotional warmth and sudden disconnection. Trait number 1, hot then cold. If you've ever known an INFJ personally, you've probably felt this shift. One day they're open, kind, and fully engaged. They ask how you're doing. They listen closely. They offer emotional support that feels genuine and rare. They seem like they're right there with you, emotionally, mentally, and even spiritually. And then something changes. It might happen overnight or slowly over time. But the result is the same. The INFJ pulls back. They stop responding with the same energy. They cancel plans. They don't follow up. They might even seem like they're avoiding you. From the outside, it looks like they've gone cold, and it's confusing. This emotional shift doesn't always make sense to other people. It feels like the INFJ suddenly doesn't care. But what's really happening is a kind of emotional overload. You see, INFJs connect with people deeply. They don't do small talk very well. Even in light conversations, they're reading tone, body language, and emotion. They're constantly absorbing how others feel. It's like walking through life with no emotional shield, and over time, that takes a toll. When INFJs hit their limit, they don't always talk about it. They just withdraw. They need space to breathe. Not because they're angry or rejecting anyone, but because their system is overloaded. And in that retreat, they're not ignoring people. They're recharging. This can be hard for friends, partners, or co-workers to understand. People assume relationships should be steady and predictable. But for the INFJ, connection comes in waves. They give fully when they can. Then they need time to return to themselves. During that quiet phase, they're not being fake or dramatic. They're processing. Sometimes they're questioning themselves. Sometimes they're recovering from emotional noise. But always, they're trying to reconnect with their own inner world. To others, this behavior seems hot and cold. But it's not about playing games. It's about survival. INFJs need to protect their emotional space in order to keep showing up with real presence. And once they've had that time alone, they often return just as warm and genuine as before, if not more. This trait might look strange, but it's actually a sign of emotional depth. INFJs don't fake connection. They just need breaks from it to stay whole. Trait number 2, alone but active. There's a stereotype that introverts are quiet because they're resting or shy. But INFJs are different. Yes, they need alone time, but when they're alone, they're not inactive. Their mind is working constantly, even in total silence. You might see an INFJ sitting in their room, walking by themselves, or even staring out a window. From the outside, it might look like they're doing nothing. But on the inside, they're running through layers of thought, emotion, and imagination. Their brain is full of stories, memories, ideas, and meaning that most people never see. This inner world isn't just daydreaming. It's a kind of silent processing that helps them understand themselves and the people around them. They replay old conversations. They question why they felt a certain way. They plan future decisions. They analyze patterns in relationships or reflect on something that happened years ago. They do all of this without needing to speak a word. This is one of the reasons INFJs often need longer alone time than other introverts. They're not just trying to relax. They're doing deep emotional and mental work. Their brain is sorting through things that most people would rather ignore. And it takes time, real, quiet time for that to happen. Even during routine tasks like cleaning, walking, or cooking, the INFJ's mind is active. They're asking questions, imagining outcomes, creating stories. It's why they often feel mentally exhausted even after a peaceful day. They've been working the whole time just inside. This inner activity is also why they can seem distracted or distant. It's not that they're ignoring you. It's that they're already several layers deep in thought. Their mind doesn't switch off easily, and once they've gone inward, it can take a while to return. What makes this trait feel weird is that it doesn't match what others see. On the surface, the INFJ is quiet, but underneath, they're constantly moving. Their alone time is not empty, it's full. And without it, they can't make sense of everything they carry. So if you ever see an INFJ pull away, don't assume they're hiding. They might be solving a problem, healing a wound, or planning something meaningful without saying a word. Trait number 3, hyper-aware of tiny things. NFJs are not the loudest people in the room. They don't need to be. While others are focused on what's obvious, what's being said, who's talking, or what's happening on the surface, INFJs are paying attention to the things no one else is watching. A shift in someone's tone. A strange pause before an answer. A glance that lasts too long. The tension in a smile. These are the kinds of things that catch their attention, even if they don't mean to notice them. To the outside world, it might seem like nothing. But to the INFJ, that one tiny moment holds meaning. They often spot the feeling behind the words. They pick up on what isn't being said, and then their mind starts to put together a picture. Not a guess, an intuitive sense of what's really going on. This trait shows up everywhere. In conversations, INFJs might suddenly pause. Not because they're confused, but because they just caught something subtle that changed the whole meaning. In social settings, they may get quiet, not because they're bored, but because they're reading the emotional energy of the group. And when someone lies, even in a small way, the INFJ usually notices it before anyone else. This level of awareness might seem strange to others. People ask, "How did you know that?" Or, "Why does that little thing even matter?" But for the INFJ, those little things are everything. They build meaning from small pieces. Their mind doesn't wait for clear signals. It picks up the scattered clues and builds a full understanding. Sometimes the sensitivity can feel like a curse. It's not always fun to notice when someone is uncomfortable or holding something back. It's not easy to sense emotional shifts in a room when no one else is reacting. But it's also what makes INFJs such strong empaths and deep thinkers. They don't just hear what you're saying, they sense who you are, even when you're trying to hide it. This trait can look weird because it's invisible. No one sees how much the INFJ is tracking. But if you've ever felt like you're reading between the lines constantly, or like you just know something's wrong without proof, this is where it comes from. INFJs live in the space between words, and that's where their strength begins. Trait number 4, living in inner scenes. For most people, thoughts are words. They think in sentences, reason through problems logically, and talk things out. But INFJs often experience the world inside their mind in a completely different way. Their thoughts show up as images, flashes, or full scenes, like short movies playing quietly in the background of their mind. When they're faced with a problem, they don't always solve it with a list. Instead, they imagine possible outcomes. They see what might happen before it does. When they think about a decision, they picture the different paths, not just with logic, but with feeling, tone, and emotional texture. Their mind is full of layers. You might find yourself replaying a conversation in your head, over and over, not just to remember the words, but to relive how it felt, how it looked, and what it meant. You might imagine entire future situations, with people who haven't arrived yet, in places you haven't been. These scenes aren't just daydreams. They're part of how you understand life. This trait makes it easy for INFJs to create, to write, to plan, and to reflect. But it can also make them feel distant. They might be sitting in a meeting, a classroom, or at dinner with someone, and seem distracted or spaced out. What's really happening is that their mind is somewhere else. Not in a rude or careless way. Just deeply focused on something that hasn't been said out loud. Others may notice this and think the INFJ is aloof or bored. But the truth is, they're often deep in thought. They're inside one of those mental movies, exploring meaning or imagining something real before it even happens. It's how they process emotions, solve problems, and predict what's coming next. Sometimes these inner scenes are comforting, like visual stories that bring peace or clarity. Other times they're overwhelming, especially when tied to anxiety or overthinking. But either way, they're a constant part of how INFJs experience the world. This internal movie-style thinking can look strange, especially to people who don't understand it. But for INFJs, it's not weird, it's natural. Their brain doesn't just think. It sees, feels, and imagines. And that makes their inner world much richer than most people could ever guess. Trait number 5, emotional burnout cycles. Most people have emotional limits. But INFJs hit those limits differently and sometimes harder than other types. When they care about someone, they care completely. When they commit to a cause, they give their full heart. When they enter a space, they feel the mood of everyone in it. It's not just awareness, it's absorption. And because they feel so much and give so much, they eventually hit a wall. It doesn't always happen suddenly. Sometimes it builds slowly. But once it hits, the INFJ shuts down. Not out of anger. Not to punish anyone. But because their emotional tank is empty. This cycle might look strange to people who know them. One week, the INFJ is full of support, checking in, helping others, creating, thinking deeply. Then suddenly, they stop replying to text. They cancel plans. They stop reaching out. They retreat. And no one understands why. The truth is, they're not trying to avoid people. They're trying to survive emotionally. INFJs feel responsible for the energy around them. They often take on too much, even when no one asks them to. And because they rarely show when they're reaching their limit, no one sees the crash coming. During these burnout periods, INFJs might disappear for days or even weeks. They don't want to explain themselves. They don't want to fake being okay. They just need to be alone, to feel, think, sleep, sleep and restore. This trait can confuse friends, co-workers, and partners. People ask, "What happened?" or "Did I do something wrong?" But usually, the answer is no. The INFJ just reached their emotional edge, and now they need space. What makes this trait so unique is how intense the swing can be, from full emotional investment to sudden silence. It feels like a contradiction, but it's not. It's the natural result of being emotionally present all the time. Once INFJs recharge, they often come back strong, wiser, more grounded, and ready to connect again. But without that quiet time to reset, they can't function at the level they expect of themselves. This pattern might not make sense to others, but for the INFJ, it's a necessary cycle. Give, retreat, return. And with each round, they become more self-aware and more careful with where they place their energy next. Trait number 6, quiet resistance. At first glance, INFJs often seem agreeable. They listen. They nod. They make space for others to talk. They might even seem like they're going along with something just to keep the peace. But underneath that calm exterior, there's often something else happening, a silent resistance that's easy to miss until it becomes obvious. INFJs don't like direct conflict. They rarely raise their voice. They don't argue just to win. But that doesn't mean they're passive. In fact, they often feel very strongly about what they believe in. They just don't always show it in obvious ways. This can lead to a strange mix. On the outside, they seem quiet, but inside they're firm. If they disagree with something, they might not call it out immediately. They might let the conversation happen. They might even nod or stay silent. But later, their actions speak louder. They might go in a completely different direction. Or they might pull their energy back without warning. This quiet pushback can confuse people. A boss might think the INFJ agreed to a plan, only to realize they're no longer interested. A friend might assume everything's fine, until they feel distance they can't explain. It's not that the INFJ is being fake. They're just choosing their battles carefully. They think before they speak. And when they feel something's wrong, they don't explode. They shift. They detach. They remove themselves from the system that doesn't align with their values. This type of resistance often shows up in small ways, not replying to certain messages, ignoring group pressure, quietly changing direction, or creating their own path outside the structure. And even though it looks subtle, it's powerful. INFJs don't want to fight, they want to transform. And they often do it by stepping away from what doesn't feel true. What makes this trait seem weird is the silence. People expect rebellion to be loud. But INFJs rebel with silence, with refusal, with redirection. They stand firm without needing to be seen. And that quiet strength is one of their most misunderstood but most powerful traits. If you've ever felt like you don't fit in, like people misunderstand you or call you weird without really knowing why, you're not alone. INFJs are wired differently. Their mind works in layers. Their emotions run deep. Their choices don't always match what others expect. And because of that, they often stand apart. But weird isn't bad. It's rare. It's precise. It's full of meaning most people don't stop to see. Each of these traits, emotional shifts, deep solitude, extreme awareness, inner movie-like thinking, burnout cycles, and quiet resistance, might make you feel different from everyone around you. But they're also signs of something powerful, that you see the world in a way most people don't. You notice what's hidden. You care more than you show. You hold space for others, even when no one's holding space for you. And through it all, you keep learning, observing, imagining, and growing, even when it feels like no one understands. So if people have called you strange, too intense, or hard to read, take a breath. These so-called weird traits are not problems. They're part of your design. And when you learn how to work with them instead of against them, they become strengths. INFJs aren't here to fit in. They're here to connect, to feel, to see beneath the surface, and to move through the world with quiet purpose. So keep being weird. The world needs it more than ever.